There comes a time in a woman's life when silence says more than 1,000 words. Not because she has nothing to say, but because she finally understands what no longer needs to be explained. Have you noticed? When a woman stops explaining, stops chasing, stops proving, the dynamic of every relationship begins to shift. What was once effort becomes ease. What felt urgent begins to lose its grip. Why? Because silence is not withdrawal. It is return. A return to self. A return to stillness. A return to the center from where all authentic strength rises. Most people fear silence because they equate it with absence. But in truth, silence is presence without noise. It is the birthplace of wisdom, emotional regulation, and unshakable self-worth. There is a profound difference between a woman who is quiet because she is silenced by fear and a woman who is silent because she has reclaimed her inner ground. One is shrinking, the other is expanding. One is suppressing her truth, the other is sitting with it. In a world that constantly demands our attention and rewards rapid reaction, the woman who learns to withdraw, not out of avoidance, but out of alignment, starts to change the entire rhythm of her life. This type of silence is not about passivity. It is not the silence of resignation or defeat. It is the silence of inner listening. It is the space between reaction and response where wisdom quietly lives. When a woman begins to practice this kind of silence, especially in the middle of emotional chaos or relational tension, something extraordinary starts to happen. She begins to hear the parts of herself that were previously drowned out by the noise of the world. It is in this silence that clarity is born. A woman who takes the time to silence her environment, turning down the volume of other people's opinions, stepping back from emotional drama, letting go of the compulsion to always be understood, finds herself entering a state of profound presence. She is no longer on the battlefield of proving, pleasing, or performing. She is simply present with what is, and in that space, she meets herself again. There is a story often told in Eastern traditions about a woman who goes to a monk and says, "I cannot hear the voice of truth. I meditate, I pray, I read the teachings, but I still feel confused." The monk simply walks with her to a lake. He picks up a stick and stirs the water until it becomes muddy. Then he says, "This is your mind, always moving, always reacting. Truth cannot be seen in turbulence." Then he stops, places the stick down, and they wait. Slowly, the mud settles. The water becomes clear. The monk points, "Now you can see the bottom." The lesson is simple but profound. The truth you are looking for reveals itself in stillness. Modern neuroscience confirms this ancient truth. When we quiet the external stimulation and allow ourselves to enter states of reflection, especially in silence, the brain's default mode network becomes active. This network is responsible for introspection, self-awareness, and emotional integration. It's in these moments that past experiences, unprocessed feelings, and intuitive knowing begin to rise gently to the surface, offering us insight we often miss when we are too busy reacting or explaining ourselves. In relationships, this inner silence becomes an invaluable gift because emotional pain and misunderstanding often arise not from the event itself, but from the way we react to it. A harsh word, a broken promise, a sudden silence from someone we care about. These things can hurt deeply, but it is our immediate, unexamined reactions that usually escalate the wound. When a woman learns to pause, to not immediately respond, not rush to explain, not retaliate, she introduces a gap, and in that gap, she regains her power. Think about it. How many times have you said something in the heat of the moment that you later regretted? How often have you sent a message, made a phone call, or lashed out emotionally only to realize later that what you truly wanted was peace, not control. Emotional reactivity is a form of emotional slavery. It means your inner world is being ruled by outer circumstances. But when a woman sits in silence and listens, not to the noise outside, but the voice within, she begins to respond rather than react. This is the beginning of emotional freedom. The same applies to emotional conversations in relationships. Often, when things go wrong between two people, there's a temptation to fix it quickly. We need to talk. Why did you do that? I deserve an explanation. And while communication is essential, timing is everything. Speaking before you are emotionally regulated often leads to more confusion. But when a woman chooses to be still first, to regulate her breathing, observe her own feelings without judgment, allow her nervous system to return to baseline, what she eventually says comes from grounded clarity rather than emotional instability. There was a woman in her late 50s who had spent most of her life bending over backwards to maintain peace in her relationships. She believed that if she just kept everyone happy, she would finally feel loved. But over the years, she noticed a deep exhaustion growing inside her. She was always explaining herself, always apologizing for taking space, always communicating in the name of transparency. But deep down, she felt unseen and unheard. One day, after a particularly difficult conversation with her partner, where she again felt the need to defend her boundaries, she decided to do something different. She simply stopped explaining. She sat in silence and let her boundaries speak for themselves. No arguments, no essays, no pleading. Just quiet alignment. Something shifted. Not only did she feel a deep peace inside herself, but the dynamics around her began to change. Her partner, confused at first, started to ask deeper questions rather than reacting defensively. Her children began to respect her time more. Friends who were emotionally draining started falling away. She hadn't said anything new. She had simply returned to herself. And in doing so, she changed the energy she carried into every room she entered. This is not magic. It's alignment. Silence, when chosen with awareness, recalibrates your energy field. It changes how others experience your presence. It introduces the quality of gravitas, the sense that you are rooted in something deeper than opinions or outcomes. And this rootedness is felt by others, even if they cannot name it. Let us now reflect on the nature of attention. In both Eastern philosophy and modern neuroscience, it is understood that attention is one of the most powerful currencies we possess. Whatever we give our attention to grows. Attention is like a spotlight. It energizes what it touches. And the question becomes, where is your attention going? When a woman is caught in the loops of, what is he doing? Why hasn't he responded? What does this silence mean? Her attention is trapped outside herself. This external focus may seem innocent at first, but over time it drains her life force. Her emotional energy is no longer hers. It becomes tethered to someone else's behavior. And in this constant external seeking, she loses her internal clarity. Energy goes where attention flows. If your attention is constantly pulled outward, into arguments, into seeking validation, into tracking someone else's actions, you begin to feel anxious, disconnected, and emotionally exhausted. Your sense of power diminishes, not because it has disappeared, but because it's been given away. In contrast, when a woman withdraws her attention from the chaos and returns it inward, something miraculous happens. She starts to feel her own presence again. She remembers her breath. She notices the tension in her shoulders. She realizes the stories she's been repeating in her mind. And as her awareness deepens, her energy begins to gather, like water returning to its source. This redirection of attention is not about ignoring others. It's about not abandoning yourself. It's about choosing to stay with your inner experience, especially when emotions rise, to notice, I'm feeling hurt, I'm feeling dismissed, I'm feeling uncertain, without immediately needing someone else to fix it. This level of self-observation builds emotional maturity, and in relationships, it changes everything. Psychologists have found that the ability to observe one's emotional state without being consumed by it is a key predictor of emotional intelligence. It's called meta-awareness, the awareness of awareness itself. When a woman develops this skill, she stops acting from her pain and starts responding from her presence. This shift doesn't just benefit her, it also invites others to meet her at a higher level of consciousness. There's a beautiful story of a young woman in her 30s who had recently gone through a painful breakup. Instead of spiraling into over-analysis, she chose to turn inward. She deactivated her social media, stopped asking mutual friends for updates, and began each morning with a simple practice, sitting in silence for 10 minutes, observing her breath and her thoughts. At first, it was uncomfortable. The mind wanted distraction. But over time, she began to feel a strength she hadn't felt before. She started journaling, taking walks, and reading spiritual texts. Not to escape the pain, but to understand it. Weeks later, her ex reached out, but something in her had shifted. She no longer needed closure from him, because she had already found it within herself. Her attention had returned home. This is not about becoming indifferent or emotionally cold. It's about choosing to no longer be governed by the emotional storms of others. When your attention is anchored inside your own experience, you become a sanctuary, not just for yourself, but for those around you. Others may not understand your silence at first. They may interpret it as distance or detachment. But in truth, it is a form of deep respect for your own nervous system, for your own energy, and ultimately for the relationship itself. Imagine a woman walking through a crowded marketplace. Noises coming from every direction. People shouting, music blaring. Now imagine that same woman stepping into a quiet garden where the only sound is the wind in the trees and the rhythm of her breath. Where do you think she can hear herself better? The marketplace is the external world. The garden is your inner world. Most people live in the marketplace, distracted, overstimulated, reactive. But those who seek wisdom, those who wish to form deeper relationships, learn to return to the garden again and again, not to escape the world, but to understand how to live in it with grace. And so, silence and attention become partners on this path. One creates space, the other directs energy. Together, they lead to a kind of stillness that is not passive, but profoundly alive. A stillness from which all true movement begins. There is no need to chase anyone. No need to prove your worth. No need to keep fixing what others cannot see. Because the moment you begin to focus on yourself and remain silent, the world starts to reorganize around your new center of gravity. Not because you demanded it, but because you remembered who you are. And from here, the journey continues. There is a moment in every woman's life when she begins to realize that being emotionally entangled with every situation is not strength. It is exhaustion. She notices how easily her peace can be stolen when someone else behaves unpredictably. How one harsh word, a delay in response, or a shift in tone can undo hours, even days of inner calm. And she begins to ask herself, not out of fear, but out of clarity, what if I didn't absorb everything? What if I could observe without internalizing? This shift in perspective marks the beginning of emotional detachment, not as a form of disconnection, but as an act of preservation and deep self-respect. Emotional detachment is often misunderstood. It is not coldness. It is not turning off the heart or becoming numb to connection. In truth, it is the opposite. It is the ability to remain emotionally open without being emotionally consumed. It is the capacity to care deeply while staying centered in your own emotional ground. Relationships, especially intimate ones, often mirror back to us our deepest fears, hopes, and insecurities. This is natural. But when a woman has not yet cultivated emotional detachment, she becomes vulnerable to being pulled into every wave of the other person's mood or behavior. If they're distant, she feels rejected. If they're close, she feels secure. Her emotional weather begins to depend on theirs. And slowly, without even realizing it, her peace becomes conditional. There's a quote that says, "You cannot control how someone treats you, but you can control how long you participate in it." That control, the one rooted not in manipulation but in mastery, comes from detachment. It comes from recognizing, I feel this emotion, but I am not this emotion. I notice this dynamic, but I do not have to become entangled in it. A woman once shared how, in her younger years, she believed that love meant being completely involved, answering every message right away, analyzing every tone of voice, being always available, always ready to explain, soothe, or rescue. But after years of emotional burnout, she reached a breaking point. Not in anger, but in clarity. She realized she had confused involvement with intimacy and self-abandonment with devotion. She began practicing what she called sacred detachment. It began with simple acts, taking a deep breath before responding to a triggering message, choosing to walk away from conversations that only repeated old patterns, spending time in solitude even when others expected her presence. And what she found surprised her. The more she practiced this stillness, the more she could see the other person clearly. Without projection, without fantasy, she no longer needed them to behave a certain way to feel safe. She could love them, yes, but from a grounded place, not a needy one. This is emotional sovereignty. From the lens of neuroscience, the ability to detach in this way activates the prefrontal cortex, the region of the brain responsible for self-regulation and executive function. When you are emotionally triggered, the amygdala, the brain's alarm system, goes into overdrive. But when you pause, breathe, and allow yourself space, you re-engage the thinking brain. You give yourself the gift of choice. Detachment, then, is not distancing from people. It is distancing from reactivity. It is placing a sacred pause between stimulus and response. And within that pause, you rediscover your strength. In relationships, especially those that challenge us the most, detachment allows us to stop seeking validation from outside and start anchoring into our own internal knowing. You stop needing others to act a certain way for you to feel okay. You stop chasing clarity from people who thrive on confusion. You stop over-explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. Instead, you become the calm in the storm, not because there is no chaos, but because you no longer choose to be swept up in it. There's a well-known story of a woman who was in a long-term relationship with a partner who frequently withdrew emotionally. Each time he would pull away, she would panic, calling, texting, trying to re-establish connection. She believed that if she didn't act quickly, the bond would be broken forever. This cycle repeated for years until one day, during a meditation retreat, she had a revelation. She realized that the fear she was reacting to wasn't rooted in the current moment. It was a pattern from her childhood, where love was inconsistent and unpredictable. She had been trying to fix the past through her present relationship. With this insight, she began to detach, not from love, but from fear. The next time her partner withdrew, she noticed the trigger, felt the urge to chase, but instead chose to sit in silence. She went for a walk. She made tea. She journaled. She breathed. And something unexpected happened. The storm passed. She didn't collapse. She didn't lose herself. Her partner returned, and so did the conversation. But this time, she was not the same, because she had stayed with herself. This act of staying, with one's breath, with one's body, with one's truth, is the heart of emotional mastery. And it leads us into another truth: stillness is not weakness. In a society that equates loudness with power, stillness is a radical act. We are taught to speak quickly, to respond immediately, to always be doing. But the most profound shifts in life often happen in stillness. When a woman is still, she is not inactive. She is listening. She is conserving energy. She is allowing the truth to rise without force. She is observing the movement around her without being moved by it. Stillness, when practiced with intention, becomes a strategy. It is not the absence of power. It is the consolidation of power. In moments of relational tension, when emotions run high, stillness offers something that words cannot. It offers presence. It communicates, I am here, but I will not play this game. I see what's happening, but I choose not to react from my wounds. I care, but I will not lose myself in proving it. This kind of presence is magnetic. People may not understand it at first. They may try to provoke a reaction. They may interpret it as coldness. But eventually, they feel the difference between someone who reacts out of habit and someone who responds from depth. One woman shared how, after years of over-explaining herself in relationships, she began to experiment with stillness. The first time her partner raised his voice, she simply remained quiet, not in defiance, but in calm observation. He paused, confused. "Why aren't you saying anything?" he asked. And she replied, "Because not everything requires a response." That moment became a turning point in their relationship. The dynamic shifted, the emotional energy changed, and she, for the first time, felt the strength of her own grounded presence. Physiologically, the power of stillness is backed by the way our nervous systems interact. We are wired for co-regulation. This means that the emotional state of one person influences the state of another. If one person is dysregulated, anxious, angry, agitated, and the other matches that frequency, the result is emotional chaos. But if one person remains regulated, grounded, and calm, they become an anchor. Their stillness has the potential to de-escalate the entire interaction. This is not just a theory, it's a lived experience. When you remain still, you give others the opportunity to meet you in that stillness. They may not rise to it immediately, but over time, your presence becomes a mirror, showing them what true stability looks like. In romantic relationships, especially, this stillness becomes a gift. Instead of engaging in circular arguments or emotional games, a woman rooted in stillness sets a different tone.